those who can't join us. Now we can start. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our annual Contracting with the City Technical Assistance Workshop, online this time for the first time. So again, just some quick user guidelines for this webinar platform on Zoom. We can't see you and we can't hear you, unfortunately, but you can see us and you can hear us. We are looking forward to hearing from you via the chat box and the Q&A box, which can open when you hit the icons down at the lower end of your screen. The chat box will open on the right-hand side and the Q&A box will open in the middle of your screen. Please feel free to type in your questions. We'll address the questions at the end of the session when we have a Q&A, but feel free throughout the meeting, throughout the webinar, to type in whatever kind of questions you may have. This will also kind of help guide us and our responses and the information that we share with you. We'll try our best to field all the questions that we can answer here today, especially if they pertain to contracting and logistics and stuff like that. But feel free to ask anything else, and we can field that either on a one-by-one basis with you guys, or we can create an FAQ document if it seems that there are trends with some of the questions that you guys have. My name is Leticia Gomez Franco. I'm the Senior Arts and Culture Funding Manager for the Commission for Arts and Culture. And joining us today, we have Carla Centeno, which is our Arts and Culture Project Manager, our Executive Director, Jonathan Gluss, and our Commission Chair, Janet Poutre. And with that, I will hand it over to Janet to give you a proper welcome.
Good morning, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you today, and I'm very glad you could make time to be with us. And on behalf of the Commission for Arts and Culture, congratulations on your FY21 Contract Award. I'm pleased to announce that we're welcoming more organizations as first-time awardees than ever before, which really underscores our commitment to invest in city arts resources throughout the community in a really deep and penetrating way. First, I want to acknowledge this is one of the more unusual years that we've all experienced, and so I want to let you know that the Arts Commission is committed to working with the field as a whole as together we navigate the coming months. Of course, none of us know what's going to happen. But working together, I think we can get through this. I want to acknowledge too that for a lot of our organizations that are coming back, your award this year is substantially different, most likely from previous years, and that is going to mean that it's a year of transformation for all of us. So we like it or not, whether we wanted to do this or not. Reduced funding is definitely problematic for a lot of you. I know that we all share the desire to help all our organizations pivot to make the most of what we have. And so our approach to the Commission has been back to basics. We're focusing on OSP and CCSD. We want to provide as much continuity as possible for you. And I hope that you know that the volunteer members of the Commission, we're here to support you to the best of our ability in the coming months as well. You know, if you want to reach out to any of us at any time, we'd be happy to chat with you. If nothing else, just to listen and give you a place to share what's going on. So with that said, I hope all are well and stay well. And I want to introduce our wonderful Executive Director, Jonathan Gluss. Jonathan?
Thank you, Janet. Before we move forward, I want to take a minute and see if we can adjust the audio. Aha, okay. My audio is great. All right, I'll speak up. Janet, how about that? I'm actually speaking up more so than you. This is the first time that's ever happened. All right, so I want to say one other thing. Could somebody tell me that the audio is good now? Yep, okay, great. Thank you, Karen. So, Janet, thank you so much for opening the conversation. I want to give a big thanks to the Arts Commission for your leadership over the last three or four months. We have asked more of the commission in the last 4 months than perhaps in the last few years combined. The commission as a volunteer board of community leaders have been very, very, very aware of the impact of COVID on the community, and has honestly pushed staff almost on a daily basis to make sure that we are gathering as much information as possible from the field, and keeping them informed while bringing information to the staff. So I just want to give a shout out and kudos to the commission for their real commitment, not just to the city, but to the field. So thank you, Janet, on behalf of all the commissioners. I also want to take a minute with all the contractors here and give a shout out to the funding team. Our funding team has been so agile and has worked really hard over the last 4 months. Carla and Leticia in particular in being as responsive as possible to all of the needs coming from the field, but also making really quick recommendations on how we could expedite FY20 to get as much funding out the door as quickly as possible to the FY20 contractors. So thank you, Carla and Leticia, for all of your good work. I know the field appreciates it, but it's good to remind you. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is some slight changes that we saw in the panel process for FY21. So for those of you who couldn't join us for the panels, it was 4 jam-packed days of panel reviews. Took place at City Hall. Ironically, it was the last week before COVID. So we literally were shutting down panel discussion days, and that was the last day we were actually in the meetings. So we got in just underneath the wire. But for the purposes of this conversation, I want everybody to understand that we worked incredibly hard this year to make sure that the panels brought 3 things to the review of your applications. One is we wanted deep expertise and knowledge in the discipline that you work in. So we recognize that, firstly, we want to acknowledge the amount of work that goes into crafting an application. And we were very committed to putting that level of intentionality around creating our panels. So thank you, Sue Marbury. So we did a couple of different things. We wanted to make sure we had very deep expertise in the disciplines in which you work. We wanted to make sure that the panels reflected the community that we live and work in. And we wanted to make sure there was deep expertise in the larger nonprofit space. So we weren't just in isolation in arts and culture, but because your organizations function in the larger community, right? So we put a lot of energy into that. We also brought some panelists in from outside of San Diego to ensure an unbiased review of the applications, but also to bring in some field expertise. So we were very happy with the composition of the panels. If you couldn't join us, please do next year, assuming we're in person. And for today, we're going to assume we're in person. But please join us. It's really an interesting process. And Leticia, I believe the tapes or the recordings are available. So if you haven't listened to your recordings, please take a minute and do so. For FY21, as Janet said, this is really a year that we wanted to be provided as much stability as possible. So we recognize that funding is less this year than it was last year for many of you. So we did not do many adjustments to the contract administrative process. We wanted to make it as simple and seamless as possible for you all. With that said, we are digging into some work over the next 3 months, and we're asking that you all join us in a little bit of this work. So we're doing a couple surveys of your organizations. That 2 of them are happening right now, and Leticia can touch on those. Leticia or Carla will touch on those. The reason why we're doing this is we really want to understand the impact of COVID on your operations, both positive and negative. This is a big learning experience for all of us. So we want to hear from you in a very honest way. So we're asking you this year that please don't think of us as a funder. Think of us as your partners, and keep us informed and engaged in the coming months as we all navigate COVID and the eventual reopening coming from outside of, on the other side of COVID. So that means that all of us are available. We always have office hours, but I just want to say to you all personally, we are all available to you. We want to hear your challenges. We want to hear how you're responding. We want to hear your successes. So if you have great new audiences that are coming in because of your virtual platforms, or you figured out how to reach new audiences or communities, or you figured out how to navigate arts education, let us know. We're very interested in it will help us as we work on FY22 in preparing guidelines for FY22. The other thing that I want to say is equity work. We all know that in addition to COVID, the realities of our communities have become very real again. Excuse me, racism and prejudice have become forefront of our work. We need to address this really head on. The city is taking some strides, and I'm very proud to say the commission, staff and leadership are in front of the city in many ways in taking this on. So we're doing our own deep equity work in the coming months, and we'll be asking and inviting you to come along with us. We have much to learn from many of you because you've been in this space for a long time, and I'm sure there's opportunities for you all to engage with us as we move through this work. I'm being purposely vague because we don't know what it's going to look like in the fall after we've done some baseline work. So we'll be reaching out, we'll be keeping you informed and engaged, and we're really asking that you help us through this process. The final thing I would like to say before I turn it over to Leticia is the contracts include, and this is not new language, but the contracts include a clause that says that if you have substantial change in leadership, be it an executive director or the majority of your board, that it's important that you reach out to us so we can actually meet with leadership. The reason why we're asking this of you this year in particular is so that we really understand what's going on in the field. We know that next week may look very different for you all than it does today. And 6 months from now may look very different as well. We genuinely need to understand what the impacts of COVID are on your organization so that, again, we can provide to the best of our ability the technical assistance you need, both formally and informally. And we want to make sure that your board members and your staff not just understand complying with our contract, but understand all the resources available in the community right now to make sure that we can weather COVID together and that your organization can come out stronger on the other end. Last thing, we're here because of you all. We are literally employed at the City of San Diego because of the great work that you do. We're here to empower your organizations to the best of our ability. We're here to make sure that our elected officials at the City of San Diego understand the great work that you do and the power of your work and the importance of your work. So I want to thank you for everything that you're doing now and over the last few months, and in particular in the coming fiscal year, because you are why San Diego is special. So thank you, and Leticia, hats off to you and Carla for all the work that you're doing, and I want to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan and Janet, for today and for always remaining present and all of our processes. We're really grateful to you. And of course, we are really grateful to all of our partners for all the work that you do. Before we get into the presentation for technical assistance, I'm just going to reiterate the rules once again, because I know a couple of people joined since we started. We can't see you and we can't hear you, but we want to hear from you. So please use the chat box and the Q&A box to share any questions that you may have. It may be stuff that we'll be covering in the presentation today. But if you have questions throughout, or if you see we go through a section and we didn't answer a particular question you have, please feel free to use the chat box to ask that question, and we will do our best to get to those in the Q&A section of our presentation today. I am now going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to be going through this presentation because I'm sharing my screen. I can't see your questions, but Carla Centeno will be taking in all your questions and then communicating with me if there's anything that we need to address immediately. If not, we will be addressing all of your questions or most of your questions either today by the end of this meeting or directly on a one-by-one basis, or creating some kind of an FAQ document if there are trends and concerns. So once again, welcome. Third welcome for you. Welcome future OSP and CCSD contractors. We're really excited for you to be with us today. We missed your faces. This is a contracting workshop, is a highlight for us because we get to see all of you. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing you soon as it is deemed safe to do so. We do miss you. Today's agenda. We're kind of splitting the presentation into three big parts. One of them is going to go over the contractual requirements, so some of the information and content that is in your contracts or your contract renewals, and remembering what was in your original contracts. The second part will be contracting process. So this is logistics and technicalities of putting together a contract packet so that we can successfully route it. And then the third part will be a Q&A. And again, you can submit your questions throughout and we'll field them so that we can address them at the end. So just some fast facts for 2021. The Organizational Support Program awarded 113 organizations with a total of 5,066,572. And the Creative Community San Diego program funded 55 projects with a total of 699,406. A big welcome to 16 brand new organizations joining us this year. That's a record amount of new orgs. We're really excited to have you with us. Carla and I and the team spent a lot of time doing outreach and trying to get the word out about our funding opportunities this past year, and the fruits of our labor are here. You are here, so we're really excited to have you. Our funding and application process, as you know, you went through the application process for FY21 starting in September of last year, all the way through February, which is when the RFPs were due. After the RFPs are due, we go through the application and review process, and then our award phase, which is when the city's working on their budget. And then this is the contracting phase. Contracting phase will be over by August 31st and September 31st, and then we'll have your performance, which is the entire year, July 1st to June 30th of next year. And then we do what we're doing now with FY20, which is the evaluation and final reporting phase. So everybody should have received, all organizations should have received yesterday an email containing their contract or contract renewal letter, a contract handbook, and declarations in lieu in case they are needed by your organization. For the new contracts, this would have been a new complete contract, which includes your Exhibit A, which is your scope of services as submitted in your RFP. And for contract renewals, it would have just been one letter. Normally, you would have received this in the mail, as you have in years past. This year, we're doing everything via email. So that's one of the big changes that are happening this year. So to start that off, you received the contract packets via email, and you will be expected to return them to us via email as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this presentation. So before we get into the bulk of the presentation, we do want to address, kind of the elephant in the room, COVID-19. We understand that this year, FY21, has dramatically impacted your organization, both in revenues and budget, as well as expected programming and engagement. We understand that because of health and safety guidelines, your ability to execute the activities and programs that you proposed last year may be affected. So we understand that some shifts may happen. Because of this, we plan to work with you throughout the contract year, and we ask the following of you now. And this, of course, is also included in your contract handbook, but we'll go through it right now. Because this is a new requirement. All organizations are asked to submit with their contracts or their contract renewal letters a memo, approximately 1 page in length, on your organization's letterhead, updating us on what FY21 may look like for you. So for OSP partners, the OSP category provides general operating support. So please outline the changes to your scope that may include reopening plan, programming changes, operational impact, including staff changes. And in addition, we would love to hear about any new responses you may have, including any alternative methods of programming and outreach. For CCSD partners, again, please attach about a page, approximately 1 page in length on your organization's letterhead, a memo that addresses again what FY21 may look like for you. For you, CCSD category is project-specific support. So we will continue to support you as long as the general scope of the project will still be realized. We understand that shifts may need to happen. So in your memo, please include any plans for change of venue, a change of date, or modifications to your scope to meet health and safety guidelines. Please remember that a full shift into a virtual format does not constitute fulfillment of your proposed scope, but we do look forward to hearing from you what shifts may be happening so that we kind of have an up-to-date idea of what FY21 will look for both our CCSD partners and our OSP partners. So now getting into the contract. You received your contract kit, now what? Please read your contract in its entirety in your contract letter, and if needed, revisit your original contract that you're renewing if you were granted a renewal. If you're doing a new contract, read your Exhibit A. Your Exhibit A is pretty much the RFP that you submitted during the RFP process. Again, this process will be a little bit different this year in that you're not giving us back a paper copy of your contract letter, or 2 copies of that for that matter, which is what we've required in the past. This year we are asking that you print, sign with a wet signature, the signature page of your contract or your contract letter, you scan it and you email it back to us with your required memo by August 31st. The submission of your signed contract or contract renewal letter with the memo is your acceptance of the award. So any contracts, any signed contracts that are not received by August 31st are assumed to be declined. So it is very important that you return to us via email your contract letter signed along with your memo. And we know that the insurance process may take a little bit longer, so we've set the deadline of September 25th for you to submit your contract packet in its entirety. A full contract packet would include the required insurance documents and the proof of current registrations. So you have two deadlines, August 31st for your signed contract, September 25th for the rest of your required contract documents, and that includes your insurance and your proof of registration. If your signed contract is not in by August 31st, we will assume that you have declined your award and you will not be moving forward with FY21. If you submit your signed contract by August 31st, but don't have your required contract packet by the September 25th deadline, then this would mean that you get a negative point in your performance on past city contracts. And if you remember, every year when you fill out your RFQ, there's a section on there, I believe it's section 7 of your RFQ, that's called performance on past city contracts. And submitting your final report late would give you a point. Submitting your contract kit late would give you a point. And if you get a certain amount of points, then you would be deemed ineligible to move forward with the RFQ, which we don't want. So please make sure that you submit your documentation on time. If you're having any issues or you need any assistance, please remember that you can always reach out to Carla or myself for assistance with this process. Now we're going to go into your contractual requirements. And these are things that are in your contract that you have to kind of fulfill before the end of your contract period. Your contract period is between July 1st of 2020 and June 30th of 2021. This means that all activities that are related to your contract must take place within this time. All expenses incurred that are related to your contract must be incurred within this time period. For invoicing, before you are able to submit any invoices, you need to have two things. One of those is an executed contract, which means you've already submitted all of your required contract documentation. We've routed that contract internally with the city. All of the parties have signed it and you have received your duplicate copy of it. So that would be your executed contract. And the second thing is you've been issued a PO number. So as soon as your contract is executed, we immediately put in a request to the city's purchasing and contracting department to have a PO issued to you, which is linked to your award amount. As soon as you get that PO number, you can submit your first invoice. That is assuming, of course, that you have incurred expenses to submit an invoice for. As you know, our city funding is on a reimbursement basis, which means that you have to incur the expenses before you can invoice for them. So as soon as you have your executed contract, your PO number, and enough expenses to invoice for, you can go ahead and submit that first invoice. Remember that expenses must be incurred between July 1st of this year and June 30th of next year. Sorry, that should say June 30th, 2021. Just as a reminder, and this is in both the guidelines and the contract, these are the following things that you cannot use city funds to pay for. That includes alcoholic beverages, travel, meals, lodging, entertainment, capital or equipment outlay. And this means purchases of equipment, things that are material, you can't purchase with city funding, buildup of reserves, or the purchase of awards, trophies, gifts, or uniforms. No lobbying or religious activities or political activities. And then remember that you must leave at least 10% of your award for your final invoice. So this is a requirement that we were able to waive for FY20, but as it is stated in your contract, you are to leave 10% of your entire award to be submitted as a final invoice when you submit your final report. And this is for FY21. And again, like for FY20, your final invoice is due July 31st, 2021. This is a hard deadline, just like it is for July 20th. Invoices that are not submitted by the July 31st deadline will not be paid. So if you are having any problems with submitting your invoicing this year and next year, please reach out to us and let us know so we can work with you. Another big kind of element of contractual requirements is a reporting. We have mid-year performance report and final performance report. For the final performance report, as you may remember from this year, if you were an FY20 partner, there are different sections. So we have the narrative questions, and this is basically where you have an opportunity to share some of your successes and challenges, some feedback. This is really good information for us to be able to move and help shape the following funding year. So for example, this year we asked questions about COVID-19 and that the impact that your organization may have suffered due to closures and stuff like that. Another big reporting element, and this is obligated by Council Policy 100-03, is financial disclosure. So depending on how much of an award you received, you have different financial disclosure requirements. So if you received $10,000 or more, part of those financial disclosure requirements are that you submit a balance sheet and an income statement for your fiscal year. If you received $75,000 or more, you would submit a balance sheet, an income statement, and audited financials. It's important to note this because we understand that audited financials, that the process to get audited financials may take a little longer and may be a little bit more expensive than just putting together a balance sheet and an income statement. So be aware that if your award amount is $75,000 or more, that will be a requirement in your final reporting. You do have 150 days to submit your audited financials from the end of your fiscal year. And that's your fiscal year, not our fiscal year. Another financial reporting is the Data Arts Funder Report, and we request this only of OSP organizations. It is requested in this year for FY20 final report, and it will be requested again for next year final report. So Data Arts Funder Report for OSP, and next year, just so you know, the fiscal years that we will be asking for will be FY18, FY19, and FY20. And then a big fun component of our final reporting is the Arts Impact Data Survey. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Carla, who is the expert on Arts Impact Data surveying, to give you an introduction and some information on what we do and why we do it.
Great, thank you. I am going to share screen, so just give me a second while I load this up. All right, can you see this? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, my name is Carla. It's so nice to be here in this virtual platform. I'm really looking forward to meeting you all at some point in the future. So I'm here to talk specifically about the Arts and Culture City Impact Map. Some of you might be familiar with it, familiar with the map. Some of you may be seeing it for the first time. But it's a map that we put together last year, and it is a map that illustrates how city-funded organizations are making meaningful impacts throughout the community. So it shows impact in every single council district. So this is kind of a visual of what the map looks like, and I'm just scrolling down. This is some more information. And then here is the map itself, which is just loading. So every year, it's our intention to gather data from you during the final report, and then that data will be used to create a new iteration of this map. So if you see here, all of this data here is from 2019. So previous contractors that receive funding through us submitted data, and that's what's being represented on this map. It's actually a really cool visual of what's happening in our city. If you notice here, there are all of these little icons, all of these colorful images that show different activities that took place in fiscal year 2019. So the map serves many different functions. One of the most important, I think, is that it shows all the incredible work that's being done by you, the contractors. And another thing that it serves is it serves as an advocacy tool, which can help your organization reach out to council districts and essentially just kind of promote the work that you're doing. And it also helps identify gaps to help you see trends and identify areas that could benefit from the programming that you have to offer. So what I mean by that is, for example, if I were to write like, I'm just gonna choose like the San Diego Ballet, this takes me to the San Diego Ballet. And then when you click on the icon, it shows information, shows a beautiful image, and then information about the San Diego Ballet. And then here you could see all of the different schools that San Diego Ballet reached. So this is a good opportunity for you to see what other organizations are doing and also identify gaps so that, you know, as you're developing programming, you can figure out what schools have been reached, what schools haven't been reached, so on and so forth. So going back to the map itself, here we are. And then the other thing that we provide is a snapshot of different council districts. So this kind of summarizes all of the data we collect. And it shows how much money was given to the council districts, how many organizations were working there, and also the reach. So how many libraries were reached, rec centers, schools, so on and so forth. So this is really a fantastic tool that showcases all of the work that OSP and CCSD organizations are doing. And it is the first time that this information has ever been showcased in this way, which is pretty special, I think. It totally shows everything, and it provides a great visual for advocacy tool, as well as just promoting the work that you do. So you might be wondering, like, okay, well, how do we go about giving you all this data so that we can populate this map? And if you are a FY20 organization, you're familiar with this page. If you're not, this is the survey that we created along with the city's IT department to kind of streamline this process. And what it entails is it consists of two parts. Part one is filling out kind of general information about your organization. If you're an OSP, where is your hub? Where is your operating site? And if you're CCSD, where is your project site? And then part two captures all of the outreach that your organization did. So this map is made specifically to capture outreach, not necessarily things that are happening within your museum or theater or company. And if you notice here, we have this Excel document, which you can download. And this document is something that we're going to edit for fiscal year 21, and we will upload on our page. And you'll be able to use this document throughout the year to track your data. I'm assuming a lot of this data is stuff that you're already tracking just for internal purposes. But essentially the internal data is essentially questions like, what school did you work at? How many participants? What type of program? And kind of general information that will be used to feed this map here. So really, I think it's a great tool. It's a great visual of the work that's being done. And we are looking forward to seeing the changes that happen with fiscal year 20, and then the upcoming changes that will be shown in the map with fiscal year 21. So I think that's it. Leticia, I'm going to shoot it back to you.
There. I couldn't find the unmute button. So thank you, Carla, for sharing information about the arts impact. The data mapping, as a lot of you mentioned in your comments, has been a huge tool for both our contractors and us as well. So thank you, Carla, actually, for working on that, and Christine. It is a really great way for us to use all the data that we're collecting from you at the end of the year. So a final contractual requirement that I wanted to highlight is the acknowledgement. So as part of your final report, and also as part of your contract, you are supposed to be acknowledging the city for funding. So the sentence that you're supposed to be including in that is financial support is provided by the city of San Diego. And the logo that you should be including with that is this logo that's on here, the Commission for Arts and Culture logo. This you can find on our website under contracting materials. Or if you need it, you can please send us an email and we'll send it over to you. And the reason why we're highlighting this here is because we know that some of you are still using the Vibrant Culture, Vibrant City logo, and that's an old logo of the commissions. So if everybody could use this logo so that we can all have consistent branding, that would be most awesome. So again, you can find this on our website under the funding tab, or you can send us an email and we can provide it for you. So now to get to the second part, we've talked about some of the highlights, stuff that's included in your contract that you're kind of expected to fulfill. The second part of this presentation will be the contracting process, or the logistics and technicality of getting your contract executed and accessing your funds. A complete contract packet consists of your signed contract with Exhibit A, which you will be emailing back to us. Or if you are renewing your contract, that will be a contract renewal letter, which is also signed, and then your one-page memo on your letterhead. Included with that, that's due August 31st. And then your organization's insurance documents and your organization's state and federal charity registration. So we'll break that down into very detailed what exactly all of that means and how you can put it together to make sure that we can review it ourselves and then process your contracting materials through the city departments as smoothly as possible. So what are the insurance requirements? There are three basic insurance requirements that you're expected to have. The first one is commercial general liability. The second one is commercial auto liability. And the third one is workers' compensation. Typically, the image that you have here is what a certificate of liability insurance looks like. The first section includes the commercial general liability. Under that is the auto coverage, and then two spots under that is the workers' compensation coverage. The line here includes the policy number that is required, obviously, and it should match the rest of your documentation. And your deadlines are also important. It's important that at the bottom of the certificate, it says certificate holder, that you name the city of San Diego the certificate holder for your insured. The certificate of insurance, or the general endorsement, requires two additional documents. One of them is the additional insured endorsement for your general insurance. And somebody asked in the chat box what the specific language that should be included on here is. And that language is the city, its officers, officials, employees, and volunteers. This may differ depending on what contract you have, as the city's general terms change year by year. The essence of the statement remains the same, but sometimes the words are in different order. So you can either look at your contract renewal letter, and if it is different from what you have, it will be shown on there as an amendment. Or if it isn't as an amendment in your contract renewal letter, then go back and look at your original contract. And you can look at Article 7.2.5.1 for the very specific language on what your additional insured endorsement should be. A reminder on this, the additional insured endorsement should be its own certificate. Sometimes the language, the required language, is included as a note in the insurance certificate, and that's not enough. Our purchasing and contracting department and our insurance reviewers want to see the additional insured endorsement as its own separate endorsement sheet with the required language and the policy number at the top of it. The second requirement that goes along with the your certificate of general liability is primary and non-contributory coverage. For workers' compensation, there is an additional document if you have workers' compensation, and that is the waiver of subrogation. And then for auto insurance, you'll either be purchasing insurance for any auto, which includes everything, or specifically owned as well as hired and non-owned. Or if your organization does not own any vehicles, then you don't need to purchase insurance for owned vehicles, but you do need to get insurance for hired and non-owned. And we'll get a little bit into that in the following pages. So again, this is what the certificate of insurance looks like. The certificate holder should be listed as the City of San Diego, and the certificate shows information such as the insurance coverage types. Like I said in the first column, it'll be CGL or auto or workers' comp, the policy numbers, the expiration dates, and the policy limits. Information for all of this in detail is included in the content of your contract. Again, for the additional insured endorsement, which should be its own page, the required language should say the City of San Diego, its respective elected officials, officers, employees, and volunteers, unless your specific contract says otherwise. And it'll be some variation of the same language, but this is a helpful sample here of what that endorsement would look like. It's its own separate page. It includes the required language as a line on there. It has a policy number up at the top. This is another sample of what that looks like as well. As you can see, there's a box that has the required language on there, and it has a policy number up at the top. Sorry. The second requirement for the general liability coverage is primary and non-contributory. So this is language that usually exists in the gigantic policy packet that your insurance broker will give you. This also has to be its own separate kind of page, and it actually tends to be page 72 of 160 pages from your insurance packet. So basically for this, all you have to do is pull out that one page that has this language in it. Make sure your policy number is up at the top, and you can do that by editing the PDF and putting up your policy number on there and then sending it over to us, and that fulfills that requirement. So it could be its own separate document that your broker pulls, or it could be the sheet that you take out of your policy. This is what it looks like when it's a sheet from the policy. Here it seems to be page 16 of 24. I've seen it be page 110 of 300, depending how gigantic your policy packet is. But again, what matters is that it includes the primary non-contributory language. And as you can see here, that would be 7A, primary insurance, and that your policy number is at the top. For workers' comp insurance, this is required for all organizations with employees. If you have employees, then you would include workers' comp insurance and a waiver of subrogation in your policy. If you don't have employees and all of the work to be performed under the contract will be done solely by volunteers, then you don't need to get workers' comp insurance, but you do need to sign the declaration in lieu for workers' comp that was sent to you with your packet yesterday. So yesterday you received 2 declarations in lieu. One is for workers' comp, and that is if your organization does not have insurance and you will not be including workers' comp insurance. I'm sorry, that is if your organization does not have employees and you will not be including workers' comp insurance with your insurance packet, then you would sign the declaration in lieu. If your organization does have employees, then you should be getting the workers' comp insurance. And with that workers' comp insurance, you would also need to get a waiver of subrogation. And again, this is something that you can request of your broker, and just make sure the policy number is at the top. And it's either called a waiver of subrogation or a waiver of our right to recover from other endorsements. And the third insurance requirement is auto insurance. Auto insurance is required of all of organizations that contract with the city. If your organization owns vehicles, now that is if your organization, these are not your own personal vehicles, if your organization owns vehicles, then you would purchase insurance either for any auto, if you wanted to be all-inclusive, or the minimum requirement would be all owned, hired, and non-owned autos. If your organization does not currently own any vehicles, then you still have to fulfill the minimum auto insurance requirement of having insurance for hired and non-owned. And this is basically in the event that you're in the planning of an event, you would hire a U-Haul to transport, costumes or materials. That U-Haul would be hired or non-owned and has to be covered as part of your contract. So everybody has to get hired and non-owned insurance. if you're not going to be purchasing insurance for owned vehicles because your organization doesn't own any, then you would sign the declaration in lieu for auto insurance and would still get hired in non-owned auto coverage. So again, you received 2 declarations in lieu with your packet yesterday. One is for automobile liability for owned vehicles. So if you don't own vehicles, you would sign this and turn it back into us. And if the other one is for workers' compensation. So if your organization has no paid employees and all of the work related to your project will be done by volunteers, then you would submit the declaration in lieu for workers' comp. Some tips for getting your insurance right. Make sure you carefully read Article 7 of your contract. It is a long section of your contract, but it really breaks down in detail everything that you need to fulfill your insurance requirements. You can always go back and review this presentation, which will be uploaded on our website as both a video platform, hopefully if the technology goes right, but definitely as a PDF. You can share the insurance requirements. You can share the entire Article 7 of your contract with your insurance broker. They're insurance experts, so they should be able to decipher that language and get you what you need. You can always reach out to us to help walk you through the insurance process again, and we're more than happy to do that. Do verify that your organization's insurance policy will not expire in the next 90 days. The contract routing process in the city sometimes takes a very long time, and if your insurance expires between that routing process, it'll just delay things even more. So when we send your insurance packet over to purchasing and contracting, we need to make sure that your insurance will not expire before 90 days, or they'll send it right back to us to ask you to renew your insurance. You are required to have active insurance for the entire contracting period. So you should be renewing those policies anyway. We just want to make sure that the actual policy that we're routing isn't going to be expiring anytime soon so that it doesn't delay the processing of your contract. And again, I know I said this like 100 times, but please make sure that your policy numbers are typed up at the top of your endorsement and your primary non-contributory and your waiver of subrogation and all of the other documentation. Just make sure your policy number for that appropriate policy is at the top of your document. So insurance was one big half of the required documentation for routing your contract. The second half is your state registrations. So there are 3 registrations, 2 registrations that need to be active, and your organization needs to not be in the list of debarred businesses on the Department of Industrial Relations list. Basically, the process for checking this is that you would click on these links, and again, this will be uploaded to our website as a PDF, and these links are live. So you click on the link for the California Department of Justice Charity Registration. You'll search for your business. The status that we want to see on that business search is an active status. So you can see down here where it's circled in the red, it shows active. You can either click on that or even screenshot that. Screen is enough. Save it as a PDF and email it to us with your packet. So we need to make sure that your status for the California Secretary of State and the Department of Justice are active and current. So for Department of Justice, you'll want your status to be current. So when you search your organization, you'll see that it's current. You'll screenshot that, save it as a PDF, and send it over to us. We're going to rerun the same search on our end because it has to be dated the day that we route it over to purchasing and contracting. But this exercise is of utmost importance because particularly for the Department of Justice, it could take them a very long time to update their status. So if you were to go back to the office today, your home office today, and do your Department of Justice search and find that you are listed as non-current for Department of Justice, it would require for you to immediately get on there, get on the phone with them and try to figure out why your status is not current. So it could be that you're missing your 990s, or maybe you submitted your 990s 2 months ago and they haven't processed them, and you need to just make sure that they're updating your status, but because the only thing we have to go by and the only thing that purchasing and contracting will go by to approve your contract is this screenshot. So the sooner you start working on this, the better. And then again, the same thing for the debarment list. You'll click on that link and you can just make sure that you're not on there. You can save that as a PDF and send it over to us. And that's part of the process that we have to do when we begin routing your contract. We have to run all of those searches again and make sure that you're still listed as active and current and not on that debarment list before we send it over to the next office. Okay, how can you expedite the process? You can send complete and accurate insurance documents and keep the documents current throughout the year. So again, remember your insurance policies should stay current throughout the whole year. Your registrations should stay current throughout the whole year. It is obviously of utmost importance that they are current and active now. So make sure you get on that right away and make sure that all of those things are current and active so that when we check them, they're current and active and we can immediately begin routing your contract. And then designate one person in your organization to be the point of contact for commission staff. We know that that may be a little bit more difficult now when everyone's working remotely, but try to establish a one-to-one kind of line of communication with either Carla or myself, and then someone on your team, so that we know. Sometimes this process takes a lot of back and forth, checking your insurance, or your endorsement doesn't have the policy number up on top. So it's nice when we can just communicate with one person who will be the point of contact for your organization. So the journey that your contract takes through the many departments in the city is first, you'll send us your packet. We'll review your packet. If your insurance is complete, your contract is signed, your memo is there, and all of your registrations are current, we'll package up that contract kit and then we'll forward it over to purchasing and contracting. Purchasing and contracting will do their own review, will do their own search of registration statuses, look over the city's insurance specialist will take a microscope to your insurance policies and make sure everything is there and all the policy numbers are on top. And once they approve, they'll package it up. They'll tell us this has been approved by purchasing and contracting. They'll sign it, and then we're able to then move it to the next phase, which is the city attorney's office. Then the city's legal department does the same thing, looks through everything, makes sure everything's on the up and up. Then they sign it, and as soon as they sign it, your contract is considered executed. Once they get it back to us as a fully executed contract, we then have to kind of re-PDF it as a package and then put it into the city's PO request system. And that's a whole other process, but we're telling you this just so that you know all the wonderful steps that your contracting will go through before you can get your PO issued. So after your contract is executed, we put it into the system and we request that a PO be issued in your award amount. And then the city's purchasing and contracting department processes that request and then will issue you a PO. You'll receive that PO via email from the city directly. And it'll look like something like this. So your contract will be executed and signed, and then your purchase order used to be sent out as an attachment, and now it's sent out through the city's vendor management system. So you'll be getting kind of like an automated message from the city's vendor system with your PO number. Sometimes that message comes with a request for you to sign on to something and do other stuff that isn't necessary now. The city is working on some kind of inclusive system that will allow us to track insurance and vendor records and all of that stuff. And these are things that we work on an individual basis with our contractors right now. At some point in the beautiful future, all of that stuff will kind of live together, and it'll be easier for you to make sure that it stays current and for you to just update it directly into the system, and then for us to be able to approve all of these things without asking you for this documentation year after year. That is it in the wonderful tech feature. For now, you'll receive an email with your PO number. Once you receive that PO number and you've incurred expenses, then you can invoice. This is a copy of the invoice template that came with your contract kit and is also available on our website. This is the template that you should be using. Don't create your own invoice template or send us a template that looks different from this. In order for us to process invoices, we have to put them through a city invoice processing system. So this is the ideal format for the automated system to read the invoice. So some highlights that we wanted to make here, because these are kind of back and forth that we have throughout the year as you're invoicing. Please remember to include your PO number. That's very important. We can't process an invoice without attaching it to your PO. Remember to include the contractor invoice number. This has to be a number, and this has to be issued by you. It could be any number. It could be FY21-1. If it's your first invoice, it could be 5,672, whatever you want it to be, you issue it, but there has to be a number there or we can't process it. You're going to put your total request amount, and that can't be more than 90% of what's in your PO. Another thing to note, when you itemize your expenses, please itemize an expenses that total out to the amount that you're requesting. Sometimes an organization will request $5,000, but will send us $20,000 worth of expenses, and then we have to go through those $20,000. And if something is ineligible, it'll deem your entire invoice ineligible. So just include the expenses that you are invoicing for, and those should total your total request. I think that's it for the important stuff. Make sure that those expenses are incurred within the funded year. So it says on their date of payment, that should have a month, a day, and a year, because we need to be able to confirm that that date happened between July 1st of 2020 and June 31st of 2021. So make sure that is a date that is spelled out. Remember that as far as backup is concerned, you have to submit backup for any expenses that were paid for by credit card or were paid for via direct deposit. So any kind of payroll, you would need to submit an itemized backup for that. If you are paying for your expenses via check, you don't need to submit backup for that, but you do need to include a check number for that expense. So include the description of the expense, the amount of the expense. If this is to a vendor or an employee, include that name. The date is very important because it's an eligibility factor for your expense. And then the payment type, if it's a check, and if it's not a check, it will require backup. As far as your match income table goes, again, matching funds should be received within the funded year as well. So July 1st, 2020 to June 31st, 2021. And you can keep track of your matching table by including the total number that is your required match, which is in your contract or your renewal letter. And then as you're meeting your match, which can be done at any time, if you can meet your match, and if you're going to submit 3 invoices and you can meet your match on the first one, you can go ahead and just get it over with, and then you don't have to worry about it later. Or you can submit up to 4 invoices of your OSP and 2 invoices of your CCSD. That doesn't necessarily have to be broken up into, 25% each invoice of your OSP. And if you have any questions regarding any specifics of that, again, feel free to reach out to Carla and myself. Make sure you sign your invoice. Make sure that the date, your invoice date in the top of your invoice matches the date that you're signing it. So don't predate it or post-date it, just the date that you sign it, that should be the invoice date, and that should be hopefully the day that you're sending it in to us. And we will try to process them as they come in. Approximately 30 days from your invoice date is when you should expect payment. If you want to sign up for electronic funds transfer, which will be a direct deposit into your bank account from the city, you can reach out to Carla, and Carla will provide you with the form. So you can submit a blank check and give the city your bank information. And this, again, is something that goes into your vendor record and will be for the city as a whole. All of this information and then some will be uploaded to the funding page on our website. Currently, the funding page is categorized for current funded organizations and applying organizations, so that'll be active when FY22 kicks off. So find the appropriate tab for you, and you should be able to find on that tab information, this presentation, the same presentation, but on a PDF format in case it's easier to browse through, as well as other online resources for you to do your contracting, and then throughout the year, any other kind of technical assistance or during the next application phase, all of the technical assistance goes into the website for easy access. So again, our online resources are on the website. If you need additional help, we will have, as always, one-on-one office hours. These will look a little bit different this year because they'll probably take place via Zoom or Teams, or can also take place via phone. So we'll be sending out a link so that you can sign up to these 30-minute appointments. And these are one-on-one appointments with Carla and or myself, where this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions about maybe your organization specifically, or if you're having issues with insurance or the registrations or anything like that, you need any kind of extra guidance that this presentation isn't answering, feel free to sign up to as many one-on-one 30-minute office hours. And of course, you can always email us at any time during this process for any kind of quick questions you may have. And here are emails for myself and Carla. We're both available to help you through this process. I will leave that up for a second. My next slide is just announcing our Q&A. And I realize that I actually can't have the presentation up and see the questions. So I'm going to do a quick reminder. Your signed contract and memo are due August 31st by 2020. Do not miss that deadline, because any contracts not in by August 31st we will assume are being declined. And then the remaining part of your contract packet, which is your insurance and your registrations, is due by September 25th of 2020. Now I am going to exit this presentation so that I can see all your questions. Let me gather my bearings here for a second.
So we did get a few questions about this presentation. It will be posted online, as Leticia mentioned. So we're working on recording this. We'll upload it, as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So this will all be made available to you in the next upcoming days.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the questions that I'm seeing here was stuff that was addressed. If you do have questions regarding FY20 final reports, please reach out to us. I know that I have a couple questions pending to get back to you. They were received in the last couple of days. We'll follow up today and tomorrow. We know the deadline is coming up on July 31st, and we want to make sure we receive all your final report data, because as Jonathan mentioned earlier, it is going to be very helpful for us as we move forward with FY22. Are you seeing any other questions, Carla, that we should be addressing now? Did we hit all the important parts of contracting?
I think we did. There's a lot. I'm sure a lot will come up. But we are looking at, there were a few kind of personalized questions, so I asked them to email us.
And any questions that were not addressed today, we understand that part of the shift that is happening creates a lot of uncertainty. So we'll take all of these questions back. We'll assess, and then we'll get together, and then we will respond to all of your questions that you had today, whether it was stuff that we covered today and things that were not covered today that maybe have to do with contracting and FY22 and eligibility, and I saw a couple of those, so we can get back to all of you with that information.
We did get a question, Leticia, which you're kind of the expert with workers' comp. If an organization only has independent contractors, they still need workers' comp, correct?
Sorry. I can go back and check on that, but I want to say that no, independent contractors I don't think are considered employees of an organization. So it would be only if your organization has employees.
Okay.
But I can go back and confirm that. That's actually a really, really good question. So we'll go back and
Yeah.
confirm, and we'll put that on our list of things to address across the board, because that's
Exactly. Okay, great. We did get a question from Cindy. Backup documentation for credit card payment would be bank statement, or is a receipt from the vendor? Is that all they need?
Say that again. The backup for what?
For a credit card payment, so for reimbursement, the question is, would a bank statement be sufficient, or is a receipt from the vendor sufficient?
A bank statement would be more sufficient than a receipt from the vendor. So yeah, a bank statement with the amount highlighted, and you can black out all of the other information redacted, and that should suffice a backup for credit card purchase.
Okay.
Or you can also submit the credit card statement, same redact whatever you don't want us to see, and highlight anything, the appropriate amounts.
And just a reminder, for payments paid via check, you just need to include the check number. You do not need to include backup.
That's correct. No backup is needed for any expenses paid for with a check, only the check number.
Correct. And then a question is the match requirement going to be the same for fiscal year 21?
At this point, yes, the matching requirement is the same, and that was included in your letter to renew or your contract on there. So you have your award amount, and then you have your matching requirement.
Okay. And then another question is, for organizations that received less than 10,000, there are no official accounting documents needed. So I'm assuming that that is an audit?
That is correct. Only organizations that receive over $75,000 in award need to submit audited financials. Organizations over $10,000 need to submit balance statements and balance sheets and income statements. If you received under 10,000, we did request this year for all organizations, regardless of award amount, to submit budget versus actual statements, and that will probably be the same for FY21. For this year in particular, FY20, those financial statements from all organizations, the budget versus actuals, are really going to let us see what some of the impact and revenue was because of COVID-19. So those are really helpful for us to see what you were expecting to have for FY20 and what you kind of ended up with, so that we can, again, shift appropriately as we move forward.
Okay. And then another question, this I think answers it for both FY20 and FY21. So on the Data Arts Funder report, does it automatically attach to the final report? So maybe you can talk about that process of filling out Data Arts.
Yeah, the Data Arts Funder report is a requirement, but it's a third-party report. So you need to go into the Data Arts website, complete the information for the 3 required years. So for FY20, those 3 required years were FY17, FY18, and FY19. And for FY21, it'll be FY18, FY19, and FY20. If you've already entered FY18 and FY19, you don't need to re-enter them again. You would just do FY20. But then you need to actually download your funders report from the Data Arts website, and then attach it as a PDF to your final report.
Yes. We did get a few questions about the banking information. So if an organization, if you have not set up your banking information, send me an email and I can tell you where to go and what information you need. If you already have a bank set up with your account and you want to change that, send me an email. And if you have one and you don't want to change anything, then leave it as is. We're good to go. Payments will be sent to whatever bank account you have currently on file.
And I did see someone mention that they had already gone through this process, but it seems that payments are still being paid to their old bank account. Please resubmit those to us so that we can resubmit them again and make sure that this time the proper process happens so that the payments are going to the account that you want them to go through.
Yes, and just to kind of provide some clarity, we're not in charge of changing and switching the bank accounts. That's something that we have to reach out to another city department and have them do it. So, you know, if you email us and you bring it to our attention, we'll make sure to, you know, make sure that the other city department is on it and working towards changing bank information. So just send us an email.
Yeah, bank account information like your address and stuff like that are actually attached to your vendor record, and that's something that is citywide. It isn't just our department alone, so we don't handle that internally. It's handled through purchasing and contracting and comptrollers. So if you were to have a contract with another city department, that same vendor record, that same bank account would apply to any payments you are receiving from them, which is why we can try to make sure that the information is routed appropriately. But if it happens that it doesn't result in funds being deposited in the account that you wanted it to, then we need to kind of follow up on that and make sure that the change happens.
Okay. Just going back to data arts, data arts is only required for OSP, not CCSD.
That is correct. Data arts is a requirement for OSP partners, not for CCSD.
Okay. We did get a question here. Well, let me get some clarity first on this one. So
I did see
okay.
a question regarding the debarment list. I did say you could take a screenshot out of it, but you're right, that is a very long list. I would actually save it as a PDF and email it to us.
Okay.
And we're fully taking advantage of this emailing stuff, because before this stuff used to have to be printed to be routed. So this is nice that we can save all of this as PDF to route it.
Yes. Okay. So this is from Felicia. Thinking ahead, now that so much of our programming is virtual, any tips on how to start tracking this programming that is outside the city, really outside the city? Leticia, do you have some insight on that?
I think that's a good example of a question that we'll take back and kind of analyze. We know that organizations are shifting in the way that they need to shift. Historically, we've tracked your engagement in person, and the virtual engagement is something new, so we want to be able to track it. Our mapping right now is based on geography, so we need to find appropriate guidelines for you to be able to track that through.
UTC, if I could add to that, thank you, Felicia, for that question. We are uber interested in the way that you're using virtual platforms. We just this morning we're having a conversation at the staff level about moving forward. How will we define outreach? Excuse me. I'm sorry. How will we define outreach here in San Diego, and then how will these virtual platforms that we're all using really elevate audience engagement, but also just the overall brand of the cultural city outside of San Diego. So we're also thinking about this from the perspective of cultural tourism and how collectively the field is building a greater awareness of the cultural life of San Diego. So we're really eager to get into that, and please hold tight, and we'll bring that to a meeting or a town hall in the coming weeks. Thanks, Felicia.
Great. I have a question here from Pat, and the question is regarding match income. Much of our income is from donations, both large and small, and various types of memberships. On the invoice template, do we need to list every transaction of these types or group them by category?
You can list them by category. So you can list donations or board contributions or ticket sales, merchandise sales, and you don't have to list each one of them individually.
Okay. Okay, some of these are pertaining to final reports, which I recommend you send us emails. That way we can kind of focus on FY21 contracting. So I'll make sure to reply here. I'm still kind of looking through these.
Lynn, and in regards to your question regarding, again, workers' comp and whether contractors can be, are considered employees, I'll get some clarity on that, because you're right, the actual contract language is needs a little bit more deciphering. So I'll get some clarity on that and get back to you all. And again, there is no data arts requirement for CCSD.
Okay. So I would, you know, if you have any questions pertaining specifically to the contracting, let us know now. We can answer it live, or you can always send us an email and we can respond via email as well. And if you have questions pertaining to fiscal year 20, I know final reports are due very soon, as well as final invoices. Send me an email. I'm responding to emails as quickly as I can. I want to make it a point to reach out to everyone. So please send me an email and I'm happy to respond to any questions you have about fiscal year 20.
I wish we had included a survey on here, because I'm really feeling like this platform actually worked really well for us, and to be able to present all of the necessary information, but also hear a good amount of feedback from you all. So I think these are good lessons that we're going to carry forward, hopefully past COVID, on creating accessibility and using technology tools to be able to kind of do some of these things.
Okay, I do have a question from Cindy regarding fiscal year 21. If a budget was written with limited activity due to COVID in mind, reduce income and expenses, a budget versus actual report will not reflect a normal year. What then?
That's the expectation, that your budget versus actuals that you're submitting as final reporting for FY20 are not going to, or your actuals are not going to reflect most likely what you began with as your budget. But really it will help us assess just how big that gap is, and where some of the loss is, and where it'll just kind of help us see what budgets are looking like moving forward. So it's okay if it shows a loss. It's not, this is just for informational data collection purposes. This does not establish any kind of eligibility or award amount or anything like that.
Yeah. So a question is, when is data arts due for fiscal year 21?
The data arts requirement will be due as part of the final report, and the final report will be due July 31st, 2021. We will make a 300% effort to release the funding report out on GoSmart earlier in the year, so that you have more time to complete that. I know you've heard that promise from us before, but we're going to do it.
That's big, Leticia.
Okay, so a question is about point of contact for contract submission. You can email me. I'll be routing all of the contracts. You can also email Leticia. So if you email her, she'll send it to me, or you can just email me directly. We do have a question about non-city entities grants are eligible for revenue matching, correct?
Yes, the only revenue that is not eligible as a matching fund is revenue that you're receiving from the city of San Diego. So if you were to be getting other funds from another city department, you could not use those to meet your match requirements, but anything else is fair game. So inside, outside the city, somebody asked about California Arts Council funds. Yes, those are all great matching funds.
Okay, another question about matching. Could you repeat the matching info one more time regarding when that is due if it is not available upon the first submitted invoice, or clarify that process one more time?
So the matching table is included in your invoicing. At this point, there's no requirement that you submit a certain amount of match for a certain amount of requests, but it would be due by the end of the year. So when your PO is completed with your final invoice by July 31st, it is expected that your matching requirement will have been met. Did that answer the question? And your matching amount, your match amount is in your contract or your contract renewal letter. And if you're having any issues with that or have any further questions about how to fulfill that requirement, please do reach out to us.
Okay, so that answered it. So there is kind of a question pertaining to fiscal year 21 fulfillment of scope of services. What will happen to CCSD contractors if they do not meet their programs in any other way than virtually because of COVID-19?
We do have currently CCSD contractors should be having something outside of a full shift into virtual in order to meet their scopes of services. But we can definitely, this is more of a case-by-case basis because organizations have different capacities and different opportunities. We understand that as it looks like right now, for example, in particular organizations that engage school audiences are not going to be able to do so, at least for the first half of this fiscal year. So we understand that a lot of shifts are going to have to be made, and we're more than happy to discuss possibilities for how you can successfully make those shifts while still fulfilling the requirements based on the allowable change of date, allowable change of venue, and the understanding that making a complete and full virtual shift into virtual platform would not constitute fulfillment of your scope of services. But I think there's a lot of room in there for possibility.
So reach out to you for more questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we will be sending out the link to sign up for one-on-one office hours before the end of the week so that you can sign up for as many of those as you need and have conversations with Carla and or myself. And then we can field all of your questions on a one-on-one basis as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm just waiting here for more questions. We just hit our 1 hour and 30 minutes. So I would recommend if you have any questions, send them now. And then again, we will be offering one-on-one office hours, so you can always sign up. And then you can always email us as well.
Yes, email us any questions that you may have. Sign up for office hours. We'll be sending a communication with all of the opportunities for technical assistance, as well as a link to this recording and this presentation also as a PDF document. I thought this was very successful. It was great to at least experience your presence via the chat and question window. We're really excited to be working with you for FY21. Welcome to our 16 new organizations. And we're excited to navigate what FY21 will look like with you. So thank you so much for joining us. I think this wraps it up for us. And thank you for all your wonderful comments.
Thank you, Carla and Leticia. Great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.